Tonight that will likely continue for some time. At the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in downtown Charlotte, they had locked the doors. They were taking furniture up at the windows in the restaurant to make sure that protesters would not come in. Clearly, these people angered by the shooting of Keith Lamont Scott, his family saying he had a book, police saying that is not the case at all. He had a gun and refused to drop his gun, and he was shot by an African-American police officer. I'm joined now by David Bruno, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, about this case. First of all, about the situation tonight in Charlotte on the street. David, how do you think authorities can get a better handle on it? David, are you there? Well, we're going to try to get David when we can. We also had David Bruno, I'm told, is with us. David, my question is, how do you think and can authorities get a better handle on the unrest that we're witnessing tonight, at this moment, at this very hour in Charlotte?
A little while ago with Shawn, and he did say that the National Guard was going to come in and try to help, and that's certainly the first step. They need manpower down there. With all the protesters, it is tough for a local agency and local agencies countywide to really deal with situations like that. So that is the first step. And Eric, what I'd like to talk about here is I'd like to echo a lot of the comments that have already been made. I'm a former homicide prosecutor, and I've investigated police shootings. And these things take time. They take time to investigate. And the public, the protesters, the agitators,
David, let me interrupt you for a moment. We're seeing, what could be a protester right there, making the gesture of a gun with his hand at the police officers. And when you're talking about, as a homicide prosecutor, things taking time, we're in a different era now. Look at this. Look at the pictures you're seeing right now. They don't want time. They look at social media. We've had authorities blame social media in part when they see, as Chief Keir Putney calls it, changing the narrative, that officials have to change the narrative, that the official story is not the one that, not only is it not believed, but people, when the atmosphere in this country right now with the shootings that we've had, especially of African Americans, they don't want to hear another side. There's such anger and distrust and unrest. How do we get it back together? How do we bring it together so that we don't have these type of scenes that we're witnessing tonight?
It's unfortunate because as a former prosecutor, I want to keep this information tight because an investigation has to take place. People have to be interviewed, canvassing. There's forensic things that need to happen for an investigation to move forward. And when the public demands information, I want to hold it tight.
But you can't hold it tight when they're live streaming. There was a report that a woman who was claiming to be Mr. Scott's daughter was saying, police shot my daddy 4 times for being black,
right,
tased him first, then shot him, and that is not at all what authorities say conflicts completely. But, of course, the people are siding with the family members.
And we saw what happened as a response of that today. There were public statements made by the police chief that this individual had a gun. He came out of the vehicle with a gun, that the police officers responded because they were defending themselves. But yet that narrative is not going to be adopted or accepted either. So it's a lose-lose for law enforcement because they have a job to do, there's an investigation, and at the same time we have protesters that are gesturing weapons in front of police officers.
David, we're coming up to a hard break. Let me keep you after this break, and we'll be right back, folks, with the very latest on this situation. I'm Eric Shawn, back now with the breaking news. Charlotte, North Carolina. As you can see, the unrest is continuing on the streets of that city tonight. It seems that police may have been getting a better handle on it now that it is 22 minutes after midnight Eastern time. We saw protesters jumping on top of cars, protesters running in the streets, attacking some of the hotels. One civilian has been critically injured. Police say he's on life support, shot. Not by a police officer, we're told, but by some other civilian. So certainly there's an investigation on that. We join now with David Bruno, former criminal defense attorney and prosecutor. And David, you were talking about how a homicide investigation takes time.
Absolutely.
But we're in this lightning speed era now, where, and the governor earlier was telling, Governor Pat McCrory was talking about the 24-hour news media as well as social media, and people are siding with what they see on social media, whether or not it's true or not. So how do authorities deal with that?
Yeah, it's a battle, and it's going to be a battle moving forward. But you know, when are we going to learn? Because we've seen this before. Baltimore is an example. Ferguson is a crystal clear example. In fact, when I heard the account that there was a gun involved today, I had to think about Dorian Johnson and his first account of the Michael Brown incident, where he said Michael Brown had his hands up. And that was a narrative that was adopted. In fact, it was a movement. The hands up, don't shoot. But in reality, when the evidence came out, it showed that that wasn't in fact true. And in fact, Michael Brown was charging Darren Wilson. You know, this happened here in this case, and it almost happened tonight as well. Because when people first found out that an individual was shot as a protester, I'm sure people's first impression and thought was that it was another police shooting. And it could have agitated the protesters, it could have agitated the crowd, but in fact that was not true. It was a protester on protester, or civilian on civilian. It was not a police shooting. And you know, so this is going to be a battle.
Well, it is a battle. And in talking about hands up, don't shoot, the protesters are saying that tonight. And right you are that the grand jury, the investigation in the Michael Brown case said that never happened.
Right.
But you're not going to change the narrative because it is there, it is out there, and it's believed. As a nation, can there be a cooling off? Can minds be changed, or do you think that we're sadly and tragically in some ways beyond that? And how do we deal with this, you know, as a country, in terms of giving people justice on both sides, between those who are on one side of dealing with this as well as the police?
You know, I hope we can get past this, but to be quite honest, I think that the movement, the Black Lives Matter, the protesters, they need to start getting behind the right cases. And this is one of the problems that I see, is that they're consistently getting behind the losers, so to speak. The Zimmerman case, the Baltimore case, the Ferguson case is an example, and it may be this case as well, as just yet another example of the protests as a result of a lawful police shooting, where somebody did not commit a crime. So that's phase one, I believe, is getting behind the right cases, because there are bad police officers out there. It is not a majority, it's certainly a minority, but those individuals that break the law, that are involved in unlawful uses of force or deadly force, should be prosecuted. And getting back to my original point, unfortunately, that takes time. The investigation takes time. The prosecution takes time. I mean, some prosecutions last years, unfortunately.
Well, and people don't want to wait for years. I don't want you to characterize this as, I know you didn't mean it in this manner, as a loser. But you're saying that cases, that they will get behind cases that the facts ultimately will not approve their first impression.
Absolutely.
I think is what you're trying to say.
That's what I meant. Exactly. They're getting behind this narrative that was adopted at a very early stage, and the evidence later shows that it was inaccurate. So when there is a protest, when people are standing up, and I understand that people are upset, there are emotions, and there's systemic history here of racism. There's no question about that, okay? But there are cases where police officers, use lawful force, and for those cases, when the evidence shows that they are using force lawfully, that is very different than some of the earlier impressions and narratives.
And we've seen black police officers shot, and in fact, in this case, police say the officer who did fire the deadly shot against Mr. Scott is an African-American police officer, Brentley Vincent, graduate of Liberty University. So, you know, in this sense, it just doesn't matter. Many of these protesters see, to them, the enemy is blue.
Right, and that is, I think, the issue. It's black and white and also blue. This individual was a police officer. So there's still going to be criticism of the actions of a police officer, notwithstanding the fact that he's African American. And this is the reaction that I think, unfortunately, we can expect moving forward. When we hear of shootings like this, the first question is going to be, was the police officer black or white? And it shouldn't be that way. The question should be, was the police officer lawfully using force? That's the question.
David Bruno, we thank you for your insight and analysis tonight as we continue to cover the unrest and the situation that they're beginning to clean up, as you can see, thankfully, at least in that part of downtown Charlotte. I'm Eric Shawn, Fox News. We are continuing. Along with Jackie Ibanez with me this evening. Stay with us. Next, Rod Wheeler will join us to talk about his view from the former police side.